Okay, YouTube, I'm going to talk right now about Obamacare, but I think I'm going to put a different spin on it. Obamacare, the Supreme Court ruled today that the mandatory insurance is classified as a tax, and therefore they can't question the legality of it. So the purpose of this video is to explain why I think the I.R.S. is vital to Obamacare, and why what seems like a mandatory program isn't. It goes back to the income tax. Now, the reality, and I may be taking my life in my hands here, but the reality of the income tax is that it's voluntary. What do I mean by that? Without getting into all the deep legal definitions, the truth be told, Congress has never altered the fundamental taxing clauses within the Constitution. Therefore, the power for the federal government to tax your income or anything else has never changed. The 16th Amendment merely clarified what the income tax was allowed to do. It did not change the fundamental taxing power of the Constitution. And ultimately what that means is that the income tax is an indirect tax. You can read through the cases, Bruce Shaber, Pollock, Farmers, all of those cases. You can read the details. I'm not going to get into all of the minutiae. Here's the bottom line. The federal government has never, ever had the power to tax your income without your consent. When you consent to allow your income to be taxed, what you're actually doing is you're working for a corporation which exists at the behest of the government and therefore must obey the government. And that corporation then submits your income statements to the I.R.S. If you choose to earn an income outside of that chain of paperwork, your income is not necessarily taxable. If you chose to be a farmer and you live on your own 2 or 3 acres of land and you grow your own food and raise your own animals and whatever, and you don't actually need money to live, well, then you have no taxable income and you haven't volunteered to pay the income tax. But when you go to work for Jiffy Lube, they give you a paycheck, and attached to that paycheck is a paycheck stub, and that paycheck stub is then aggregated on a document called an I-9 or a W-4 or whatever that is then transmitted back to the I.R.S., and that flags your identity, which by the I.R.S. is organized by your Social Security number, as a taxpayer. If they're not receiving mail on you, then they don't have any idea if you have an income or not. So the income tax is voluntary in so much as when you decide to work at a job which is going to give you a paycheck stub, you are volunteering to pay the income tax. And that's what all those forms you sign when you apply for that job mean. Well, the same is true with Obamacare. You know, they're talking about John Roberts used this particular court decision as a political maneuver, or all of that's irrelevant. Here's what's important. You don't have to pay it if you choose to live outside the system. They don't even have a way to track you down. If they're not receiving mail on you, then they're not going to come after you unless you're trying to be some millionaire playboy flamboyant that's going to attract some attention. But if you're just a low-key guy living on a piece of ground somewhere, not signing any forms and not showing any IDs and not being on the grid, they're not going to waste their time trying to find you. They're going after big fish. You don't have to have health insurance. The reason they married it to the IRS is because you don't have to pay the income tax either, but they've made you believe that you do. What does it mean if they literally have the power to tax your income? That means that they own your productive energy. They own your creativity. They own they own your work ethic. They own everything that you may produce as a human being outright. They own it completely. If they have that power, if the Constitution grants them that power, they own you completely. And they allow you to keep whatever they decide is a fair amount of your productive energy. Well, does anybody in America really believe that the IRS has that power, that the federal government, that the Congress even has the power to take ownership of your body? If they do, then America was a lie from the first day. It was never true. We were never free. There were no inalienable rights because they owned your body from the day you took a breath. I don't believe that. Call me a patriot, call me a fanatic, call me a lunatic, but I simply cannot believe that James Madison and Thomas Jefferson and the founding fathers of this country created a government of slave owners and a citizenry of slaves. And that's essentially what a mandatory income tax means. You volunteer to pay that tax when I call it picking the low-hanging fruit. Get the easy job, go to Taco Bell, get the paycheck stub, pay the rent, do what everybody else does because that's the way it's supposed to be, and you're volunteering to be part of the system. But let's say you decide to live on a commune and you don't earn any money. Are you still a taxpayer? Right? Let's say that your whole life is dependent on charity. Are you still a taxpayer? Is the money that people give to you to help you survive taxable? Where does the taxpayer start and the person stop? I can tell you that point is when the IRS received mail from someone with your name on it showing that they paid you something. And until they receive that mail, you're not a taxpayer. You can voluntarily opt out. Just like you can voluntarily opt out of the whatever, man. They use the federal government has used tax laws to exert a dictatorial absolutism. As long as this government, at the very first moment it occurred to somebody, they started using it. They used a tax law to ban marijuana. There was no constitutional authority to ban it, so they created a tax and then made sure that there was no way for you to pay that tax, and that was used to make marijuana illegal. And this is just one in a litany of different government abuses. Anyway, the bottom line is, don't be alarmed at this Supreme Court decision. The media is going to blah, 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 blah. But remember, and I'm going to take this quote directly from the article that I read. It says, the law tells almost everyone that they have to have health insurance. Well, what does almost mean? Who are the people that don't have to have it? It doesn't say, according to the journalist who wrote this article, it doesn't say everyone must have health insurance. It says almost everyone. So who doesn't have to have it? You got to read the fine print. In law, every word is meaningful. Much more meaningful than most people are aware. The bottom line is, you don't have to pay the income tax if you don't voluntarily work a job that's going to enter you into the income tax system. You don't have to have health insurance if you're not participating in the income tax system. That's why they married the two together, because almost everybody voluntarily, they just lay their heart on the anvil and let the government beat it with a hammer to pay their dues, to live within the system, because it's easier. It's easier to buy groceries than to grow your own food. It's easier to have a car and work a regular job, because that's what everybody else does, than it is for you to find a way to make money in your own home. But there are ways to live outside the system, and all it takes is a choice. If you choose to be a hamster on the wheel, then that's your choice. But remember, you are making that choice. You're making it because your wife is telling you you have to make it, because your family is telling you you have to make it, because your kids they want the latest sneakers so that they can compete with the other kid. Whatever the reason, you're being pressured into choosing to be a hamster on the wheel, and you can always choose not to be. It's not going to make you a popular guy. It's going to make you a freak. At least today you're a freak. Maybe tomorrow you're going to be the genius that knew beforehand. But for right now, you can choose to be a freak and not run that wheel. It's up to you.